In 1908, President Theodore Roosevelt moved to protect the Grand Canyon by proposing a ban on timber and mining operations within its bounds. It would be 11 years, however, before Congress formally designated the canyon as a national park. Sensing that time was running out, amateur explorer G.E. Kincaid launched a small wooden boat onto the Colorado River, determined to prospect for gold, silver, and copper deposits before the area was closed. About 40 miles upriver from the El Tovar Hotel near Crystal Canyon, he noticed unusual coloration in the sediment layers nearly 2,000 feet above the riverbank. Tying off his boat, he scrambled up the sheer rock face and discovered, hidden beneath desert brush, hundreds of stone-carved steps winding up to a high ledge in the canyon wall. Following the steps, Kincaid came upon what clearly was a man-made cavern entrance. He switched on his flashlight and stepped inside, immediately confronted by walls covered in strange inscriptions, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs rather than any Native American script. The tunnel stretched far into the darkness, and Kincaid, drawing his pistol for safety, pressed on. He meticulously recorded his observations. The main passage, roughly 12 feet wide, sloped down to 9 feet at its farthest visible point. Side passages branched off both left and right about 57 feet in, leading to living room-sized chambers, some as large as 30 by 40 feet, each entered through oval doors and ventilated by circular openings bored into the 3.5-foot thick walls. Kincaid estimated that the complex could have housed as many as 50,000 inhabitants. In one section he found granaries lined with glazed pottery still containing seeds. Elsewhere were cooking areas and a massive dining hall, all littered with ancient artifacts. He collected small metal and ceramic objects for later study. Further in, he documented a metalworking chamber, its benches strewn with copper tools, charcoal, and slag, evidence that these people had mastered hardening metals millennia before Western archaeologists believed such technology existed. Yet no traces of the ore sources or smelting sites could be located. After hours of exploration, Kincaid entered a vast crypt lined with shelves, each bearing a mummy wrapped in bark fabric and covered in clay, each accompanied by a copper cup or broken sword fragment. Intriguingly, all of the mummies were male. No women or children were interred here, suggesting a specialized warriors' barracks sector. Realizing he needed assistance, Kincaid returned to Phoenix with detailed notes and samples, requesting funding and support from the Smithsonian Institution. Weeks later, Professor S. A. Jordan arrived with a team of 40 researchers and laborers. Under enhanced lighting, they discerned that the tunnels were laid out with deliberate symmetry, all converging on a central chamber. There, over 100 feet from the entrance, stood a colossal statue of a seated figure holding lotuses, a Buddha-like image with distinctly Eastern facial features. Scholars cautiously compared it to Tibetan deities, though the religion it represented remained a mystery. Dubbed the Citadel, the complex stretched for hundreds of feet beyond the central hall. In one of the larger rooms, Jordan described rows of mummies on angled shelves, each occupant accompanied by urns and broken swords, the finer ceramics appearing on the higher tiers. Analysis of the burials confirmed the absence of women and children in this zone. Systematic excavation revealed hundreds of rooms, barracks, granaries, workshops, temples, and thousands of living quarters. Artifacts included swords and shields of copper, bronze, and an unidentifiable gray metal likened to platinum, pottery urns and cooking utensils, small cat's-eye stones, and large engraved stone tablets bearing hieroglyphics. Despite these findings, experts could not translate the inscriptions or definitively identify the statues. Two conclusions, however, were unanimous. This civilization was extraordinarily advanced, practicing metallurgy and organized agriculture long before the recognized dawn of the Bronze Age, and it had not arisen locally but had arrived from distant lands, possibly from Egypt or Asia. Kincaid's pleas for further support were ultimately denied, and both he and Professor Jordan vanished from the historical record. Over the next century, mainstream archaeologists dismissed the Kincaid-Jordan reports as sensationalist hoaxes, pointing to two sensational articles in the 1909 Phoenix Gazette as mere clickbait. Yet the legend persisted among fringe researchers and some Native American oral traditions. Hopi mythology speaks of ant people, pale subterranean beings who sheltered the Hopi from cataclysms at the behest of a sky god who arrived in a moving star. Other Pueblo legends tell of golden-skinned humanoids with lightning-firing silver tubes who flew silver canoes through the sky. Such myths mirror flood traditions worldwide, in which a divine race re-emerges to restore civilization after a cataclysm. In modern times, independent investigators like Jerry and Kathy Wills have attempted to retrace Kincaid's route, uncovering period artifacts near the rim and suspecting a sealed entrance mere feet away. These efforts have been thwarted by federal restrictions, rockfall prevention gates, no-fly zones enforced by unmarked planes and military helicopters, and warnings that entry constitutes trespassing. Meanwhile, the Grand Canyon's official feature names, Isis Temple, Tower of Set, Buddha Temple, Krishna Temple, invite speculation about ancient cultural connections, though authorities maintain their selection is coincidental. Conspiracy theorists such as David Hatcher Childress argue that the Smithsonian's commitment to isolationism in archaeology, insisting that pre-Columbian American civilizations developed independently, led it to suppress evidence of diffusionist theories, including reports of gigantic human skeletons and sophisticated mound-building cultures in North America. Stories persist of 7- and 8-foot skeletons found in the Mississippi Valley, stone coffins in Alabama, and larger-than-normal human remains unearthed during World War II in Alaska, findings allegedly spirited away or stored in inaccessible warehouses. The Hopi still watch the sunset from their village rooftops, waiting for the return of the messenger from the Grand Canyon's depths, and with him, the restoration of their ancient land. In 1886, mining engineer John T. Reed heard from Paiute elders the legend of a race of giants who, after a long and bloody war, were defeated near Lovelock Cave, Nevada. Intrigued, Reed sparked official excavations by the University of California in 1912 and again in 1924, and these digs yielded thousands of artifacts, but perhaps the most astonishing finds were almost human skeletons measuring between 8 and 10 feet tall. Today we call these the Lovelock Giants. Although mainstream science has largely ignored such discoveries, giants appear in the myths and scriptures of many cultures. In ancient India's Satya Yuga, humans were said to reach 32 feet in height. The Old Testament's book of Genesis speaks of the Nephilim, mighty men of old, men of renown, born when heavenly sons of God consorted with human women. The Book of Enoch and other Dead Sea Scroll texts elaborate on these towering beings before the Great Flood, and in 1 Samuel, the Philistine warrior Goliath, said to stand between 7 and 11 feet tall, possibly descended from the Anakim, fell to the young David's sling. Even earlier, the Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki, a race of godlike giants from the mysterious planet Nibiru, now speculated by astronomers as a distant planet 9 lurking at the edge of our solar system. According to Sumerian tablets, when Nibiru's atmosphere deteriorated, the Anunnaki came to Earth seeking water and gold. After a slave revolt, they spliced their DNA with that of Homo erectus, creating Homo sapiens, the first man or Adamu, bred to serve, worship, and work in their minds. Some Anunnaki, forbidden to interbreed with humans, did so anyway, producing offspring known as Nephilim. When Nibiru's next perihelion destabilized Earth's magnetic field, triggering extreme aurorae, melting ice caps, and a cataclysmic flood, the Anunnaki fled back to Nibiru on skyships laden with gold, leaving human civilization to rebuild from the deluge. Flood myths echo in cultures worldwide, and recent geological evidence suggests a great flood once did sweep the globe. Meanwhile, evidence of giants continues to surface across North America. Native American tribes, from the Choctaws' cannibalistic Nahulo to the Paiutes' red-haired Si-Te-Ka, tell of enormous, warlike peoples driven into caves and incinerated. Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, daughter of Paiute chief Winnemucca, recorded these stories as history, even weaving red hair from a giant into her garments. Reed's later excavations of Lovelock Cave revealed scorched cave walls, an enormous handprint, over 10,000 artifacts, including a size 29 sandal, clothing far too large for normal humans, and the mummified remains of 2 red-haired giants, a 7-footer and a 9-footer. Nearby, in 1931, the Nevada State Journal reported 2 more giant skeletons in a dry lake bed, also red-haired. Beyond Nevada, colossal remains have been found coast to coast. In Ohio's Serpent Mound region, 19th-century accounts describe 3 8-foot skeletons with double rows of teeth. Frederick Ward Putnam's 1891 discoveries included skulls twice as thick as normal. Similar finds were reported near Miamisburg Mound and the Hopewell sites. In West Virginia, Sarasett Mound, a 7'2" skeleton emerged in 1959 under Carnegie Museum auspices. Along the Mississippi River in Minnesota, quarry workers uncovered a 10-foot skeleton in 1868 before the bones vanished en route east. In Iowa's eastern mounds, John Wesley Powell's Bureau of Ethnology recorded a 7'6" skeleton whose bones crumbled to dust, and in Missouri and California, 8-footers and even a 12-foot sarcophagus with a giant skeleton, complete with quartz-inscribed coffin and double teeth, have been noted. Over 2 centuries, more than 1,000 such accounts, documented in newspapers, histories, scientific journals, diaries, photographs, and Smithsonian records, suggest a widespread presence of giants. Yet despite frequent transfers of these finds to the Smithsonian Institution, their bones and artifacts have largely disappeared from public view. Inquiries in 1950 and again in 1992 about wooden coffins from Alabama's Crump's Cave, coffins inexplicable to Native American mortuary practices, were met with claims of lost specimens and asbestos-sealed warehouses. This apparent suppression traces back to a late 19th century ideological struggle within the Smithsonian between diffusionists, led by John Wesley Powell, who saw Native Americans as descendants of advanced cultures, and isolationists under Cyrus Thomas, who insisted that pre-Columbian civilizations in North America developed independently of Mesoamerican or Old World contacts. Thomas's victory institutionalized the notion of Native Americans as primitive, and evidence supporting diffusionism, or the existence of giants, was deemed fraudulent or buried. Yet the archaeological record, from Lovelock Cave to the Ohio and Mississippi valleys, from mounds and caves to shipwrecked sarcophagi, continues to whisper a different story, that giants once walked the earth, their bones hidden, lost, or suppressed, waiting for history to catch up. Between 1933 and 1935, a team of archaeologists uncovered the spiral mounds in Oklahoma, a discovery that seemed to rewrite everything we thought we knew about ancient North America. Deep within one of the largest burial chambers, they found the remains of a man over 7 feet tall, clad in full armor, his tomb adorned with a pot containing thousands of lustrous pearls and countless other artifacts. At the time, this was heralded as one of the greatest treasures ever found. Yet, just as quickly as news of the armored giant spread, it vanished into obscurity. Human remains and valuable objects were hastily discarded or left to disintegrate before scholars could study them. When the excavation concluded, dynamite was used to collapse the chamber entirely, and any remaining relics deemed valuable were quietly sold off. The Smithsonian Institution was notified of the find, but to this day, neither the giant in armor nor his priceless treasures can be located. Fast forward to 1994 in Mexico's Acámbaro zone, where over 33,000 ceramic and stone figurines emerged, some bearing astonishing imagery: humans coexisting with dinosaurs, a warrior astride a triceratops, mermaids, human-animal hybrids, even a Bigfoot. Laboratory testing dated these pieces to roughly 6,500 years ago, yet their very existence challenges everything we believe about prehistoric human knowledge and contact. Strikingly, the figurines depict diverse ethnicities: black, white, and Asian, none of which should have been present in the Americas at that time. Alongside these artifacts were teeth of Ice Age horses and the skeleton of a mammoth, species thought long extinct by then. Archaeologists Charles C. de Pozzo and John H. Tierney, along with Carlos Perea, the regional director of archaeology, authenticated the discoveries, but the Smithsonian and mainstream authorities dismissed the site as fraudulent, labeling the artifacts modern forgeries despite carbon dates pointing to 4,500 BC. When Tierney filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all Acámbaro records, he discovered that the files were missing and that existing objects in Smithsonian custody were locked away from public view indefinitely. Tierney later published his findings in a book provocatively titled Acámbaro: Archaeology's Astounding Scandal, but the work remains nearly impossible to find. Stories of giants in America are nothing new, yet they consistently slip into the realm of myth and conspiracy. A 1000 AD sweet potato unearthed in the Cook Islands carries the Quechua name Kumara, suggesting prehistoric voyages between Polynesia and South America. DNA from Pacific chickens has been found in pre-Columbian Chilean sites, carbon dated to the early 14th century, and even human genomes from Polynesians reveal genetic markers traceable to Colombia around 800 AD. Such findings hint at encounters long before Columbus, yet mainstream archaeology often explains them away as drift voyages, contamination, or sheer coincidence. The pattern repeats with other controversial claims: alleged Egyptian artifacts from the Grand Canyon, traces of tobacco and coca in ancient Egyptian mummies, and medieval Arabic maps depicting the Americas. In each case, when independent researchers bring forward anomalies, they are met with ridicule, marginalization, attack, and ultimately censorship. The Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act of 1990 mandates the return of indigenous human remains and sacred objects from federal agencies, but explicitly exempts the Smithsonian. As a result, countless skeletons and artifacts remain in the institution's vaults, forever out of reach. Critics argue that this cycle of suppression hinders genuine discovery. They point to recent archaeological revelations: Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a 12,000-year-old complex with advanced planning and construction, yet note that such paradigm shifts only gained acceptance when overwhelming evidence could no longer be ignored. If giants did once walk the earth, or if ancient civilizations truly spanned oceans, it may take equally irrefutable data to break through the walls of skepticism. Until then, the skeletons in our institutional closets, both literal and metaphorical, remain hidden, waiting for someone bold enough to pry them loose. Now, Enoch warned the giants and the watchers of the world: repent, or feel God's wrath. They ignored him. When the floodgates of heaven burst forth, water rushed over the earth, destroying all but one vessel, a single, massive ship, the Ark. 5 months later, the waters receded and the Ark grounded on a mountaintop. A man named Noah emerged, and civilization began anew. Stories of Noah's Ark exist in almost every religion and culture, but did Noah and his Ark really exist? There's so much evidence that the CIA classified it for almost 50 years. Why? Because it raises two startling problems. The Ark is far older than anyone thought, and Noah himself wasn't merely a man of earth. Now, James Bruce, born 1730 into a wealthy Scottish family, rebuffed a law career to pursue a dream, to find the source of the Nile. For over a decade he braved war-torn deserts, forged alliances with kings, battled savage tribes, and survived deadly illness. Finally, near an Ethiopian monastery in the highlands, he found a bubbling spring, at last, the Nile's legendary source. Inside that monastery, Bruce discovered something far more astonishing, an ancient manuscript in Ge'ez, the old Semitic language of Ethiopian Jews. It was the Bible, not a Bible, but the Bible as preserved in Ethiopia for nearly 3 millennia. Here, the Old Testament and Quran's terse mention of the Queen of Sheba yielded to 3,000 years of uninterrupted tradition. Ethiopia's claim that Sheba bore Solomon a son, Menelik, who spirited the Ark of the Covenant back to Aksum, where it remains to this day. Bruce was stunned to find 81 books in the Ethiopian canon, books missing from his King James Bible 66, and among them, the Book of Enoch. Enoch, Noah's great-grandfather, was barely glanced at in Genesis. Here, he commanded 108 chapters of earth-shattering revelation. Enoch hadn't described heaven as harps and clouds, but as a city in the sky, gem-studded walls, corridors of blinking lights, godlike beings conducting business. Had he stumbled upon technology? A spacecraft? The Book of Enoch vanished until 1947, when a shepherd at Qumran tossed a stone into a cave and discovered clay jars filled with scrolls. Among almost 1,000 manuscripts lay 11 copies of Enoch, complete, intact, matching the Ethiopian text. Yet even after Dead Sea Scroll confirmation, the Book of Enoch remains apocryphal, fake, some say. But read it, and you encounter possibly the first recorded alien abduction. The night Enoch heard a humming in the sky, saw a sphere of light, and was beckoned aloft by the archangel Uriel. He toured the cosmos, learned of the 364-day year, the moon's cycles, watched from the storehouse of nature where unknown plants thrived, an arboretum aboard the mother ship. He witnessed a book of life tallying humanity's deeds, a divine database. He saw a chamber of torture, perhaps where abductees endure experiments, and at last the throne of God, indescribable, overwhelming. Enoch's purpose was both cosmic and terrestrial, to bear witness, so that humankind would know heaven and hell, and to deliver a dire warning to some of God's angels on earth, the Watchers. 200 of them had descended millennia ago to protect and teach humanity, agriculture, pottery, healing, astronomy, civilization's cradle. But pride and disobedience crept in. They revealed forbidden knowledge, metallurgy for weapons, war, witchcraft, and mated with human women. Their offspring, the Nephilim, became giants of cruelty, who devoured humans and bred terror. Soon humanity itself mirrored the Watchers' corruption. Enoch begged the Watchers, the Nephilim, and all mankind to repent, or suffer divine vengeance. They refused. Enoch returned to heaven and implored God. Earth was foul, a cataclysm was needed to cleanse creation. One righteous man and his family would be spared, Enoch's great-grandson, Noah. In Genesis, God instructs Noah to build the ark. In Enoch, it's Uriel who relays the warning, explaining that the flood's primary targets are the Watchers and their hybrid children, the collateral destruction of humanity regretted but accepted. The specifications are astonishing. Cypress wood, pitch sealed inside and out, 300 cubits long, over 450 feet, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high, longer than a football field, taller than a 5-story building, with 3 decks and a 1-cubit-high roof opening for ventilation. Noah, radiant from birth, his body as white as snow, his hair white as wool, his eyes lighting the house like the sun, was divinely marked. He could speak at once, and his father Lamech feared the child's provenance until Enoch confirmed via Methuselah that Noah was his true grandson and chosen to survive. Some read this miracle as ancient biotechnology, artificial insemination or genetic engineering. With the ark ready and selected pairs of every kind of creature aboard, infant animals to maximize space, or as some theorize, DNA samples stored for future recreation, the flood began. On that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. Rain fell 40 days and nights. 5 months later, the waters abated. After a year aboard, Noah, his family, and the earth's creatures disembarked to repopulate a cleansed world. Skeptics argue no global flood is geologically plausible. Some reimagine it as a local deluge, perhaps the catastrophic Black Sea flood around 8400 BCE, when Mediterranean waters breached into a freshwater lake, inundating 40,000 square miles over 10 months. Submerged settlements and freshwater fish fossils support a massive regional flood remembered in the Epic of Gilgamesh and Genesis. But believers in a literal, universal deluge point to the coherence of ancient texts, Genesis, Enoch, Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Ark's startling dimensions and technology. What if both sides are missing the point? What if there really was a great deluge, yet Noah never existed in the singular? Across the world, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, from India to Australia, countless cultures tell remarkably similar flood stories. In the ancient Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim is warned by the god Ea of an oncoming cataclysm, builds a massive ship, and preserves his family and the animals. In the story of Atrahasis, Lord Ea, also called Enki, sends his high priest to visit the Abzu, Africa, and see the marvels he had built there. Staying behind in the Mesopotamian region, Enki proceeds to sleep with his wife, giving birth to an albino child, whose skin was said to be the color of clouds and eyes blue like lapis lazuli. It was said of him that the sun made him cry and his tears always brought rain. He was shunned by the local populace and forced to live among animals, a prerequisite of the Tarzan story. It was said that Atrahasis had the ability to communicate with the beasts of the field and was chosen by Lord Ea to survive a flood caused by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, taking genetic samples of the local wildlife upon a craft piloted by an assigned Anunnaki until the waters receded. In the Hindu tradition, Manu rescues a divine fish, who then alerts him to a cosmic flood. Manu builds a vessel that carries him, 7 sages and the seeds of life. Native American Ojibwe lore tells of Nanabasho floating to safety in a canoe with animals. An aboriginal tale from Arnhem Land explains a world-drowning flood when a giant frog releases the water it had hoarded. The Chinese Gunu myth cleanses the earth by inundation. The Inca speak of Viracocha drowning the giants. These are but a handful of roughly 250 independent flood legends, each separated by oceans yet united in core narrative. For decades, scholars dismissed these parallels as mere coincidence or cultural borrowing. To suggest a global flood was labeled pseudoscience, until geologists and climatologists began to recognize evidence for planet-altering meltwater pulses at the end of the last ice age. Around 11,600 years ago, as the Younger Dryas came to an abrupt close, ice sheets collapsed, sea levels rose hundreds of feet, and tsunamis reshaped coastlines. In North Africa, rapid melting carved new lakes and left high-water marks etched on ancient hillsides. Simultaneously, across the globe, coastal settlements vanished beneath rising seas. Survivors would have had little warning, though some myths speak of divine messengers, perhaps echoing memory of earthquakes, volcanoes or meteor airbursts that preceded massive flooding. Those who heeded the signs built boats, those who did not were swept away. In this view, Noah may not have been a lone patriarch but 1,000 local heroes, each preserved in the lore of his people. Still, searchers have long hunted for a single, material ark. In 1949, U.S. Air Force reconnaissance photographs over Turkey's Mount Ararat revealed a roughly rectangular formation on an eastern ridge. Dubbed the Ararat Anomaly, later spy plane imagery was classified by the CIA, only 6 frames surfaced in 1995. Enthusiasts speculated a beached vessel preserved in ice. In 1959, Turkish Army pilot Captain İlhan Dürpner spotted a boat-shaped feature at 6,000 feet above sea level, 538 feet long, allegedly exactly 300 Egyptian royal cubits, and 50 cubits wide. On-site investigators reported anchor stones, drog stones, petrified wood, metal rivets, and ground-penetrating radar signatures hinting at beams and 3 decks. The Turkish government even built a visitor center at the site, declaring it the Ark's resting place. But closer scrutiny demolishes these claims. Ron Wyatt, the most vocal proponent, lacked archaeological credentials, his metal detectors were hobby-grade, and his petrified finds were never independently verified. Soil iron readings match regional baselines, mud flows and lava solidification can mimic ship shapes. Anchor stones are locally quarried, not Mesopotamian imports. No professional geologist or paleontologist has authenticated wood, dung or exhaustive artifact caches. Wyatt's later Freedom of Information request revealed the 1949 images show naught but natural geological strata. The Dürpner site, rather than preserving divine craftsmanship, exemplifies pareidolia, human pattern finding imposed on random forms. Beyond Ark legends, some propose a cosmic trigger. A massive asteroid impact could have released heat to melt ice caps instantly, but we find no clear crater of appropriate age. A more exotic theory invokes a colossal solar flare or coronal mass ejection. Brief yet intense radiation and magnetic storms might have warmed polar ice, causing simultaneous melt worldwide. This would explain the near-global flood memory and the sudden climatic shift at the Younger Dryas end. If true, humanity's greatest vulnerability lies not underground or in bunkers, but in the sky above. Intriguingly, many myths begin and end with visitors, godlike figures warn of doom, then assist in civilization's rebirth. Could these be memories of extraterrestrial intervention? The Book of Enoch describes angels, or watchers, descending from heaven, teaching forbidden knowledge, and witnessing human corruption. Elijah's chariot of fire, Muhammad's ascension on the Buraq, Arjuna's heavenly voyage in the Mahabharata, all speak of advanced craft and contact. The Dogon of Mali, an isolated people living in cliffs, claim instruction from beings of Sirius B, yet they accurately described a white dwarf companion invisible to the naked eye and unknown to astronomy until the 19th century. Skeptics question whether any of this proves alien visitation. But if we take the flood myths seriously as cultural fossils of cataclysm, and if we entertain high strangeness accounts as more than metaphor, then human history may be richer and stranger than our textbooks admit. Floods reshaped continents, myths preserved survivors' warnings, and perhaps ancient observers glimpsed phenomena they could only interpret as gods or angels. Whether Noah was one man or many, mortal or divine, his story reminds us, when catastrophe looms, whether from water, rock, or solar fury, those who listen, adapt and build anew become the seeds of our shared future. In respects to the Knights Templar organization, the common tale tells of humble warrior monks protecting pilgrims on the road to Jerusalem, betrayed by jealous kings and ultimately destroyed by the church. But beneath that veneer lies a far more astonishing legend of murder, mystery and buried treasure, and a secret powerful enough to rewrite history. Yes, the Templars did arrive in the Holy Land to guard Christians, but that was merely their cover story. Their true mission was excavation. They were hunting ancient technology. Once on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, they began digging, day and night, until they struck something extraordinary, a large, gold and acacia wood box that they immediately recognized as the Ark of the Covenant. Over years of secret tunneling they unearthed not just 6 of the 10 legendary arks, but also the Spear of Destiny, the Holy Grail, the Emerald Tablet and countless scrolls of esoteric wisdom. These discoveries revealed that the arks had once formed part of a global network, centered in the pyramids of Egypt, that generated limitless energy. Inside the Great Pyramid's so-called sarcophagus they found space for one of the arks, confirming that the pyramids had been built as power plants, not tombs. The arks themselves stored manna, a monoatomic white powder drawn from plants and animals, described in the Bible as the Israelites' miraculous desert food but, to Templar tradition, an alchemical superconductor providing energy, healing, even immortality. Extracted via recipes in the Emerald Tablet and other texts, manna could power flying crafts, cure disease and even lift heavy objects through levitation. Their quest, however, began long before Jerusalem, in Constantinople, now Istanbul, where a secretive Brotherhood of the East practiced alchemy, astrology and sacred geometry. When Hugues de Payan, a French nobleman, met them, he learned not only of Atlantis, a global civilization wiped out by cataclysm thousands of years ago, but of its advanced relics still buried beneath King Solomon's temple. Entrusted with the mission to recover these artifacts and keep them from falling into the hands of kings, popes or invaders, de Payan and 8 fellow knights formed the Order of the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon in 1118. Back in Europe, as they cultivated wealth and influence, founding a medieval banking system complete with promissory notes accepted across Christendom, they secretly preserved their treasures and knowledge. They discovered that the civilization of Atlantis had spanned the globe, had controlled the weather, eradicated poverty, communicated telepathically and lived in harmony with nature. They learned of the Anunnaki, alien gods from a distant planet, adored by the Sumerians, who had come to Earth 450,000 years ago to mine gold, creating humanity itself through genetic manipulation to serve as laborers. Cultures worldwide still preserved fragments of this power under various names, Mana, Graal, Thea, and symbols like the Templar cross appeared in ancient Egypt, Sumeria and beyond. But the greatest shock awaited the Templars beneath Jerusalem. Alongside Atlantean relics they uncovered an ossuary containing the bones of Jesus Christ, Mary Magdalene, John the Baptist, and even the children born of Mary's unions with both men. Such a discovery, had it become public, would have shattered the authority of the Catholic Church, upending its teachings on salvation, the divine feminine and reincarnation. Forced into silence, the Templars claimed to hide, protect and study these artifacts in secret, adopting a syncretic, Gnostic faith, seeking divine knowledge within rather than through priests or sacraments. For 2 centuries the Templar enterprise thrived. They built fortresses and cathedrals, amassed fortunes, mustered armies and fleets, coined money, ran trade networks and lent to kings, even to Philip IV of France. Yet in 1307, fearing their power and wealth, King Philip and Pope Clement V conspired to destroy them. On Friday the 13th of October, 1307, mass arrests and forced confessions led to accusations of heresy, culminating in the order's disbandment in 1312 and the execution of Grand Master Jacques de Molay in 1314. But here, too, the legend diverges. A parchment discovered in the Vatican archives in 2001, the Chinon parchment, reveals that Pope Clement V had absolved the Templar leadership of heresy and intended to maintain the order, until Philip's pressure forced him to dissolve it anyway. As de Molay burned at the stake, he is said to have cursed both king and pope, and within a year both were dead, Clement by mysterious illness and Philip by stroke. Knowing the net was closing, the Templars had already smuggled their fleet of ships, laden with treasure, relics and forbidden texts, into the night of October 12, 1307. Only a small contingent remained to face capture, the rest vanished into hidden chapters of history. In the centuries that followed, they re-emerged under other guises: Freemasons in Scotland, the Knights of Christ in Portugal, Rosicrucians in Germany, and perhaps even across the Atlantic, in legends of Oak Island and the White Indians of Panama. Their symbols endure on cathedrals, chapels and carvings across Europe: the Red Cross on white, the twin knights on one horse, cryptic crosses and angelic figures in strange poses. Their Gnostic insight, that divinity lies within and that true knowledge transcends institutional dogma, remains their greatest legacy. Though the Knights Templar as an order ended in 1312, their mission, to guard ancient wisdom and await the right moment to share it, continues to this day, whispered across the ages in myths, symbols and secrets yet to be fully revealed. Roslin Chapel, consecrated in 1446, is famously adorned with over 100 carved green men leafy, pagan motifs believed to stem from ancient Celtic traditions and generally signifying anything outside the Abrahamic faiths of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Their presence in a 15th century Catholic church has long puzzled scholars, but according to Templar lore, these carvings were deliberately placed as cryptic messages. Among the most intriguing are depictions of North American flora, corn and trillium, plants Europeans should not have known about until long after Columbus. How, the legend asks, could the chapel's builders have been familiar with these species decades before the discovery of the New World? The answer, as Templar legend tells it, lies with Sir Henry Sinclair, grandfather of William St. Clair, Roslin's patron, who was not only a Knight Templar but, the story goes, one of the earliest Europeans to set foot in North America. Proponents claim Sinclair's voyages and the organization's secret maps, including the mysterious Peary race chart, the famed Ottoman map of the Americas and even Antarctica, centuries before their official discovery, provided the knowledge. Columbus himself, they say, was linked by blood and brotherhood to the Sinclairs, a distant relative and nephew by marriage to a Grand Master. He purportedly leveraged Templar cartography to secure support, first from Portugal, then from Spain, for his 1492 venture across the Atlantic. Templar tradition further suggests that Portugal's refusal to back Columbus was not due to skepticism but because they already plied the New World's shores. Portugal, they argue, was so saturated with Templars that its very name, conventionally Port of the Garden, actually meant Port of the Grail. These knights supposedly traded gold with indigenous peoples, flew the Templar cross on their caravels, the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, and were initially welcomed before later waves of Europeans turned hostile. In search of proof, enthusiasts point to Viking runestones, like the Kensington runestone, Minnesota, 1898, inscribed in 1362, and the Narragansett stones, Rhode Island, 1939, arguing that early Norse explorers were themselves Templars. Nearby Newport Tower, with its 8-columned, octagonal design, is claimed to be a 16th century Viking solstice marker, though mainstream historians regard it as a colonial-era windmill base. Yet Templar storytellers see in the tower's eightfold symmetry a Gnostic symbolism of divine completeness, echoing the 8-sided base of Egypt's Great Pyramid, where candidates for initiation were once said to be ritually enlightened. Across medieval Europe, they note, Templar and related Masonic sites, from Temple Church in London to Ely Cathedral, feature octagonal chambers and octets of carvings, suggesting a hidden geometry of their order. Further intertwining Templar, Masonic, and Rosicrucian myths, these accounts trace a continuous lineage of secret societies safeguarding alchemical lore, holy relics, and Atlantean technologies. Oak Island's Money Pit, first excavated in 1795, allegedly yielded a Templar engraving before being commandeered by Freemasons, and the island remains strewn with crosses and secret society emblems. Why such secrecy? Because, so the narrative goes, the Templars' ultimate mission was to elevate humanity, physically freed from tyranny and spiritually liberated from ecclesiastical constraints, using their hidden vaults of arcane treasure and knowledge. Today, they claim, 7 such vaults lie buried across the United States, poised to release technologies, free energy devices coveted since Nikola Tesla days, life-extending medicines, and abundant food and water production that could eradicate war, poverty, and disease. The modern face of this tradition is Timothy Hogan, self-styled Grand Master of the Order of the Temple of Secret Initiates, OTSI, who promises a controlled unveiling of Templar secrets to benefit all nations and faiths equally. Hogan's detractors, other fraternal orders and online skeptics, accuse him of exaggeration, infighting, and self-promotion, pointing to personal controversies, a high-profile divorce, a bizarre Facebook hijacking by an acquaintance claiming divine reincarnation, they deem irrelevant to his Templar claims. Hogan, however, traces his lineage to Revolutionary War Templars, his great-grandfather General Joseph Warren, reputed alchemist and Boston Tea Party conspirator, and presents a family history steeped in Masonic and Templar leadership. As presenter A.J. Ecclesfish explains, Hogan tailors his presentations to his audiences. In academic contexts, he sticks to documented facts, while in enthusiast circles, like the esoteric streaming network Gaia, he delves into legendary speculations, always labeling conjectures as legend says or some believe. Though no vault or artifact has been publicly verified, Hogan insists the day of revelation is near. Whether one sees these tales as fascinating folklore or as latent truth awaiting archaeological vindication, they remind us that history often dances on the edge between legend and fact. If Hogan and his brethren ever produce their hidden treasures, be they urns of ancient saints' remains, Atlantean machines, or the fabled Emerald Tablet, the world may indeed shift toward an age of abundance. Until then, these stories remain powerful catalysts for imagination, urging us to consider what remarkable legacies of knowledge might lie buried beneath our feet. Now, which would you prefer, eternal life or unlimited wealth? How about both? For that, you need the Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance said to transmute base metals into gold and grant its possessor immortality. The Book of Aquarius, a mysterious modern grimoire, claims to contain the plain-spoken instructions for creating this fabled stone. Although the alchemical process can take years, its ingredients are astonishingly simple. You may already have everything you need at home. Yet the Book of Aquarius itself is only the latest link in an unbroken chain of esoteric knowledge, whose origins lie in the Emerald Tablet, an artifact said to reveal not only the recipe for the stone but the very secret of the universe. The legend begins in Atlantis, some 36,000 years ago, with an advanced race known as the Children of Light. Among them was Thoth, later venerated in Egypt as the god Thoth, who learned the art of alchemy and the key to immortality at the dwellers' halls of Ameni. As cataclysmic floods destroyed their homeland, Thoth and other teachers fled to establish colonies across the globe. In Egypt he inscribed their most profound wisdom on a single emerald green tablet, the Emerald Tablet. Drawn down through medieval alchemy, the tablet resurfaced in Arabic translations around 800 CE and sparked centuries of scholarly intrigue. Its terse, symbolic verses, as above, so below among them, became the cornerstone of Hermetic philosophy, inspiring secret societies from the Rosicrucians to the Golden Dawn. Isaac Newton himself devoted 3 decades to deciphering and translating the tablet, convinced that its lore held the path to divine mastery. Yet for all its mystique, the Emerald Tablet offers only allegory, not a step-by-step cookbook. That gap, so its proponents say, was finally filled on March 11, 2011, when an anonymous manuscript called the Book of Aquarius appeared online. Spanning 165 pages and citing 49 alchemical works, the oldest dating to the 11th century, the book strips away metaphor and presents clear, literal instructions for creating the Philosopher's Stone. Its secret? There is only one ingredient, distilled, purified human urine, believed by medieval alchemists such as Paracelsus to contain the concentrated life essence that powers all living things. According to the Book of Aquarius, the process unfolds in 2 major phases. First, one continuously distills one's urine, removing the heaviest residues until only an ultra-pure essence remains, a step that may take months or even a year. Second, that essence is recombined with the lightest particles, a sort of salt, then heated gently for over a year through successive stages, black putrefaction, whitening, and finally reddening into the fabled stone. Though the odor is foul and the timeline daunting, 3 to 8 years is typical. A small community of amateur alchemists on the book's original form traded tips, shared progress, and even posted photographs in hopes that someone would succeed. The website was later taken down without explanation, fueling rumors of secretive powers or Illuminati elites suppressing the recipe. Skeptics dismiss it all as modern pseudoscience or an elaborate hoax. Yet history records at least one remarkable case. In 1669, German alchemist Henning Brand boiled and distilled some 1,500 gallons of urine, seeking the stone, only to isolate glowing phosphorus. Though he failed to transmute metals or gain immortality, his accidental discovery laid the foundations of modern chemistry. What of Nicolas Flamel, the real alchemist of the early Renaissance who, legend holds, created the stone in 1418 and lives on with his wife in perpetual youth. Flamel's fame grew through embellished posthumous texts, but credible evidence is lacking. Similarly, Dr. Maurice Doreal, born Claude Doggins, claimed in 1925 to have unearthed 10 emerald tablets in Egypt, founding the Brotherhood of the White Temple on their teachings. His translations and ensuing religion blend genuine Hermetic fragments with passages lifted wholesale from fictional works, and his biographical claims collapse under scrutiny. Nonetheless, his followers endure, and his tales of extraterrestrial children of light and lost Atlantean technologies persist in YouTube videos and Colorado lodges. In September 1989, Doug Muchler arrived at Fort Richardson, just outside Anchorage, Alaska, as a newly minted counterintelligence officer charged with investigating espionage and terrorism. Having grown up amid Ohio's gentle hills, Doug found himself staring at a giant table in the map room, his eyes tracing the rugged mountain ranges, winding rivers, and scattered mining towns of his new home. Yet one tiny patch on the Denali National Park map, just 60 miles west of Mount McKinley, stood mysteriously blank, labeled Area Not Surveyed to Date. It made no sense. Alaska, nearly 700,000 square miles, had been meticulously charted. Intrigued, Doug filed the oddity away, confident that, as a chief warrant officer in military intelligence, he could uncover any secrets he needed, if they were meant to be found. 3 years later, in late 1992, Doug was off duty with a handful of soldiers when both the Anchorage and Fairbanks news broadcasts flickered with an astonishing report. An underground nuclear detonation in China had sent seismic shockwaves all the way to Alaska. Seismologists' cross-section revealed something unimaginable beneath central Alaska's frozen crust, a pyramid, ebony stone black, taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its base lay buried 100 feet below the surface, and it soared 550 feet from base to apex. Doug recognized the location immediately, the very patch marked not surveyed to date. He sprinted to the map room and confirmed it. That night he set his VCR to record the 11 o'clock news, determined to prove what he'd seen, but when the broadcast rolled around, the pyramid story had vanished without a trace. The next morning, Doug stormed into the local TV station under his military intelligence credentials. The station manager denied any knowledge of such a report. No tapes existed. Doug's anger flared, until a young staffer, pale and trembling, pulled him aside. Yes, they had aired it at 6 o'clock, but 2 men in dark suits had coerced the station's news director into deleting the segment, confiscating all recordings. National security, the staffer whispered. Involving a Chinese nuke, we were told to pretend it never happened. Doug returned to Fort Richardson baffled, but with the conviction that something monumental lay hidden beneath Alaska's wilderness. In 1993, Doug transferred to Fort Meade, Maryland, home to the National Security Agency. Though officially assigned to a nearby unit, Doug found himself drawn to the NSA's colossal archives. After casually requesting any files on Alaskan archaeological sites, and keeping mum about pyramids, he was handed a slip of paper pointing to dusty shelves in a classified warehouse. But no sooner had he lifted the top file than 2 men in black appeared, instructed him that he had no need to know, and escorted him out. They warned him, they don't want anyone messing with up there. Doug dropped the matter, but his resolve only grew stronger. After leaving military service, Doug went public. He contacted investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe, an Emmy-winning UFO and conspiracy researcher. Once his story aired, other witnesses emerged. Marty Johnson, a former Navy engineer who recalled being flown to a secret Alaska site circa 1959, then descending via concealed elevator into a vast underground complex dominated by a towering black pyramid, and Lee Pearson, a retired teacher who, in 1978, had accompanied a military helicopter to a secluded landing zone just east of Unalakleet, where he saw nameless operatives loading crates under the watch of unmarked guards. Both men described razor wire, guard towers, and the hum of powerful generators, evidence, they believed, of a clandestine facility harnessing pyramid-generated energy. Marty Johnson's son added that his father had built an aluminum replica of the Dark Pyramid, which, when energized, produced more than enough electricity to power a farmhouse. Some theorists even suggested that an ancient network of pyramids, from Egypt to Indonesia to Alaska, once tapped the Earth's zero-point field to transmit free energy globally. Remote viewers from the CIA's Project Stargate, notably Pat Price, reported psychic impressions of an underground base beneath Mount Hayes, further fueling speculation of human-alien collaboration. Linda Moulton Howe compiled these accounts in 2012, asserting that the Dark Pyramid served as a charging station for UFOs, explaining the Alaska Triangle's thousands of sightings and mysterious disappearances. Skeptics point out inconsistencies. Doug's dating of the Chinese test doesn't match official records. No corroborating soldiers have stepped forward. remote viewing remains controversial. Yet the convergence of maps, military cover-ups, eyewitness testimony, and psychic impressions leaves open the question, is there truly a colossal black pyramid buried beneath Alaska's frozen expanse, a relic of ancient or extraterrestrial technology generating inconceivable power? Until someone ventures into that forbidden square of Denali National Park, rides the old hidden road, or stalks the vanished airstrip, the Dark Pyramid will remain one of the great mysteries lurking beneath the last frontier. In early 1948, halfway around the forgotten world, the curator of the National Museum of Iraq sat in his dusty office when two American archaeologists entered with a code-locked briefcase and a shoebox. Inside the case was stacks of crisp $100 bills. Inside the box were two golden Sumerian cylinder seals, not catalogued, never exhibited, long since boxed away. Thrilled beyond reason, the curator sold them on the spot. By day's end, the Americans were airborne in a USAF C-97 Stratofreighter bound first for London, then Maryland, and finally Holloman Field in New Mexico, their prize box neatly beside them. They saw the little metal tubes as curios, embossed with pastoral scenes and inscrutable cuneiform, nothing more than ancient signatures. They didn't yet know these seals held instructions far older than Sumer itself. The Third Reich had long pursued relics steeped in myth, Ark of the Covenant, Holy Grail, Spear of Destiny, believing them keys to supernatural dominion. Nazi archaeologists combed the Middle East for artifacts capable of bending reality. But the cylinder seals, uncovered in the late 1930s, proved stranger than legend. A few proved non-Sumerian, far older, gifts from alien visitors called the Anunnaki, who arrived 500,000 years ago to mine gold for their dying world. 12,000 years ago, a cataclysm melted the ice caps and sparked a global flood, wiping out much of humanity. The Anunnaki taught the survivors how to find and use wormholes, stargates, hidden at 50 points worldwide. After World War II, these seals and crashed UFO tech fell under the purview of Majestic 12. By combining ancient engravings with extraterrestrial hardware, MJ-12 built a machine more terrible than any atomic bomb. They called it the Looking Glass. In a secret lab 12 miles from Area 51, at a base known colloquially as S4, guards in unmarked desert camo escorted new recruits past red and blue lines painted on the floors. Cross the red, they were told, and you'd be shot on sight. Behind those lines slept P-45 and P-52 craft, saucer discs, triangular stealth ships, and barrel-shaped pods from centuries yet unborn. Dan Burish, once Dan Crane, arrived at S4 in 1994, intrigued by the rumor of alien biology and quantum machines. Level 2, Alice's Floor, housed Project Galileo, where pulse-drive reactors were reverse-engineered. On Level 4, he found the Looking Glass itself, a 10-foot ring of dark alloy, nested spinning coils, and at its heart a quartz-lined barrel filled with ionized xenon and argon. An operator perched in a central chair could remote view past, present, and future, her eyes peering through a gas-shrouded wormhole. The tech was refined from a chair salvaged from a P-52 crash near Kingman, Arizona, in 1953, one of whose survivors, Kayla, became a reluctant ally to humanity. With psychic sitters, MJ-12 scientists fed choices into the Looking Glass and observed countless timelines. For years, they steered events, military operations, diplomatic initiatives, covert strikes, like cosmic chess. But in the late 1990s, every timeline converged on December 21, 2012. Nothing followed that date. No future existed. Survivors of that cataclysm would endure pole shifts, devastating quakes, tsunamis hundreds of feet tall, volcanic winters of ash-black skies, the collapse of global civilization, and then rebuild in subterranean shelters as humanity evolved into the emotionless, gray-skinned P-45s of Earth's distant future. Unbeknownst to MJ-12, the disaster was no accident. It had been engineered by a splinter faction of future humans, P-45 offshoots, who saw the apocalypse as a necessary reset. Their cousins, the P-52s, including Kayla, opposed the cataclysm and sabotaged the Looking Glass, delaying the end. Today, a secret war rages across time. P-52 white hats inside military command, psychic agents, and alien defectors working to guide us toward a positive timeline of peace and enlightenment, and the P-45s, Illuminati elites, and world leaders loyal to apocalyptic, authoritarian designs. They stockpile bunkers, Denver International Airport among them, awaiting the storm. They sow fear through wars and media propaganda, engineering crises to shrink the population and tighten their grip. But another timeline beckons. By 2030, Nagaru will have awakened, destined to dismantle secrecy, expose every hidden crime, and build a new era of unity. The future is not pre-written, it is forged by our choices.